Hello guys, welcome back in Goku Manhwa. Let's continue.
The instant RMC spotted the colossal shadow serpent, he charged forward to confront it. Previously, RMC lacked an aerial movement skill, but now he possessed one, and without hesitation, he unleashed his spectral wings, soaring into the air alongside his skeletal army. To halt his advance, venomous rain began pouring from the serpent's fanged maw as soon as it noticed him. These venom droplets burned like acid, falling from above in relentless streams. As they struck the skeleton's mid-flight, they corroded bone and armor alike. Many of the skeletal warriors who had risen into the air alongside RMC faltered, their wings weakened, halting them in place. However, RMC had already devised a plan for this. Stationed below, the undead Lich commander watched closely. The moment the Lich saw the injury spread, he invoked mass restoration, mending damaged skeletons and imbuing them with renewed power. The ones whose wings had faltered now regained their strength and once again ascended with unwavering determination, closing the gap behind RMC. Yet, halfway up, more venom cascades were unleashed toward them. Seeing the enemy force advance so near, the serpent kept spraying venom without pause. Even so, the skeletons twisted and spun to evade the acidic downpour, pressing upward. At that moment, as RMC neared the serpent's massive coils, he triggered his marrow cage skill. From behind him, jagged bone chains burst forth at blistering speed, latching onto the serpent's scales and coiling around its immense body. In seconds, an intricate cage of bone sealed it completely, locking it in place. Realizing its entrapment, the serpent let out a deep, rumbling hiss, thrashing violently to shatter the prison. But the chains wound tighter, gripping its coils, jaws, and tail without mercy. The serpent's hissing grew frantic as it fought to break free, yet the bone prison's power proved unyielding. Around it, RMC's airborne skeletal warriors closed in from all sides, forming a deadly ring. From robed skeleton sorcerers to long-range skeletal marksmen and heavy melee units, every type of warrior was present and poised to strike. The next instant, a rain of jagged bone spears plunged toward the serpent. On impact, it let out a howl of pain as shards splintered across its hide, shaking the air. Yet, when the dust settled, the serpent's glistening scales showed barely any harm. In response, blinding arcs of spectral lightning ripped across the sky, striking the serpent again and again. With each strike, it writhed and roared in agony, its movements growing desperate. Summoning all its strength, it shattered the bone prison in an explosive burst. The moment it was freed, the serpent's burning gaze locked on RMC's skeletal forces with pure malice. Then, without warning, it uncoiled its jaws, and from within, a torrent of eerie crimson mist surged outward. At that moment, the Lich commander stationed below raised his staff high and summoned the storm barrier skill. A shimmering vortex formed around the skeletal ranks, shielding them from the creeping mist. The serpent lashed out at the skeletal warriors without pause, then launched itself into the air again, this time drawing in an even denser swirl of venomous energy. After forcing the serpent into this state, RMC smirked and muttered that the tides had turned, that in less than a minute he had already struck a deep wound and erased the shame of their last encounter, and that it was time for the beast to meet its fate. In answer, the serpent unleashed a thunderous hiss and rose higher into the storm. As it ascended, the formation of the skeletal forces broke apart, scattering under the crushing waves of pressure. Those caught in the surge of venom-laced wind lost their footing mid-air, while others battled desperately to keep steady. Just then, Mu Xianjian cried out to RMC in alarm, warning him to look upward. Hearing her, RMC's eyes narrowed, and he spotted a blazing sphere of molten stone hurtling down from the clouds. Recognizing the technique instantly, RMC veered away at high speed, remarking that the very move which had nearly ended him before had returned. The colossal meteor was tearing through the skeletal warriors in its path as it descended toward the earth. In the chaos, RMC swooped in, caught Mu Zhang, and carried her away, knowing retreat was the only option. With Mu Zhang's Yan in his arms, he sped through the air, putting as much distance as possible between them and the impact site. From within his grasp, Mu Zhang turned her head and watched the meteor plummet. When it slammed into the ground, an immense shockwave erupted, sweeping RMC into its grip despite his speed. The violent blast flung him far, his skeletal armor and spectral wings shattering under the force. Yet RMC emerged largely unharmed, the armor having absorbed the brunt of the impact. Rising to his feet, he fixed his gaze on the smoking crater. Just as before, a pulsing object lay at its center, an egg, from which arcs of crackling lightning surged into the air. RMC, with Mu Xianjian beside him, stepped closer, watching the storm of energy dancing around the egg surface. Immediately, a spectral glyph appeared before RMC displaying the title Ancient Shadow Serpent, Lord Class Boss. Its level was 67, and its current state read Molting Ascension in progress, rendering it temporarily invulnerable. RMC regarded the sight with narrowed eyes, muttering that it was undergoing ascension, but that once the process ended, he would bring it down again. After 5 minutes, the outer layer of the egg-like shell fractured, and from within surged a towering silhouette of dark energy. The serpent, reborn, shot skyward at blinding speed. Another glyph flared into view, revealing its level had now risen to 68. Though its skills and core abilities remained unchanged, subtle increases marked its strength, agility, spirit, and resilience. Studying these changes, RMC remarked in grim acknowledgement that it had grown even more formidable after ascension, but that this changed nothing, its end would still come. With that, he invoked the Legion Empowerment skill, sending a surge of necrotic energy through his skeletal army, instantly restoring their vigor. They leapt into motion as one, charging toward the serpent with renewed speed. Simultaneously, RMC summoned his skeletal armor, the plates fusing over his form like living bone. Fully prepared for the second round, he turned toward Mu Zhang with a steady, unshaken gaze and told her, "Be ready to channel the sealing ritual at my signal. I may call for it without warning." Mu Xianjian's expression hardened instantly, her usual calm now sharpened into battle focus. She gave a firm nod, the tip of her staff lowering slightly as the runic patterns along its surface began to hum faintly in anticipation. A soft ripple of silver light curled around her form, her way of silently showing she was prepared to act at a moment's notice. High above, the reborn serpent spiraled through the stormy air, its vast silhouette illuminated in flashes of violet lightning. Each beat of its wings sent shockwaves rippling outward, tossing fragments of shattered bone and dust across the field. The air felt charged, every breath tinged with the metallic taste of power. Without delay, RMC planted his heel into the scorched ground, channeling mana deep into his skeletal armor. The runes etched along the bone plates flared one by one, and from the space behind him erupted jagged chains, each link forged of condensed marrow and shadow. They twisted through the air like living creatures, whiplashing toward the serpent in a sudden burst of speed. The serpent sensed the danger, but the strike was relentless. Several chains coiled around its scaled torso, while others lunged for its wings and tail, tightening like the grip of an ancient predator. This time, RMC didn't rely solely on restraint. From all around, his skeletal army moved as if sharing a single mind. Mags in tattered robes raised skeletal hands to the sky, summoning orbs of pale fire and bolts of spectral lightning. Archers with hollow eyes notched bone-tipped arrows, each glowing faintly with necrotic enchantment. Heavy melee units, hulking warriors clad in fractured plate, charged forward with weapons that dripped with greenish venom. The order was unspoken, yet absolute. In one overwhelming wave, the army unleashed its assault. The air ignited with magic, arrows hissed through the wind, and lances of raw energy tore across the space between hunter and prey. The serpent reeled. Its coils twisted violently as it attempted to shake the barrage, but the impact was relentless. Sparks flew where arrows struck its scales, bursts of crimson flame erupted where magical blasts hit true, and the sound of bone weapons clashing against hardened hide echoed like drums of war. Mu Zhang took her moment. She stepped forward into the storm, the wind tugging violently at her robes. Lifting her staff high, she began to weave the sealing art, her voice a low, steady chant. Threads of radiant energy spilled from the staff's tip, twisting and braiding into an intricate net that glimmered in the dark sky. It snaked toward the serpent, seeking to bind its power at its source. For a moment, everything was going in RMC's favor. He could feel the tide turning, control shifting into his grasp. A sharp, predatory grin formed across his face. But it lasted only seconds. The grin vanished as his gaze snapped upward. Above the storm clouds, something vast and burning black was descending. At first it looked like a shadow blotting out the moon, but as it tore through the clouds, its edges glowed a violent crimson, heat distorting the air around it. A meteor, no, something far worse, was hurtling straight toward them, its sheer mass pulling the wind into a spiraling vortex. The serpent roared as if welcoming the chaos. Without hesitation, RMC surged forward, grabbing Mu Zhang by the waist in one swift motion. His skeletal wings flared wide, the runes along their length blazing to life. With a single powerful beat, they launched into the air, slicing through the rising gusts. The pressure was immense, every stroke of the wings feeling heavier as the gravitational pull of the incoming mass increased. Below them, the ground began to fracture, hairline cracks racing outward as though the Earth itself feared what was coming. The heat licked at their backs, and the light from the meteor-like mass grew blinding. RMC angled sharply to the side, weaving between falling debris as he put as much distance as possible between them and the impact zone. Behind them, the colossal object screamed through the air, tearing the sky apart. And then it struck. The world exploded in light and sound. The shockwave ripped across the land, flattening what little structure remained. Dust and fire surged outward in a wall of destruction. Even at their distance, the blast caught them, throwing RMC and Mu Zhang through the air like ragdolls. His skeletal armor splintered under the force, shards scattering into the storm, and his wings disintegrated in a burst of bone dust. They tumbled through the air until RMC slammed into the ground, rolling to shield Mu Zhang from the worst of the fall. The moment the earth stopped spinning beneath him, he rose, the remains of his armor falling away in brittle pieces. His eyes locked on the crater in the distance, a vast, smoking scar upon the world. From its center, arcs of violent lightning leapt into the air, illuminating a single object at its heart, an egg, and from it pulsed the same oppressive, primal energy as before, only stronger.